from Exodus chapter 20. I want to talk to you about the fourth of the Ten Commandments. Now, some of you, if you're old enough, will remember the fall of 1982 when 7 men and women were killed here in the Chicagoland area. In fact, 2 victims, one from Elmhurst and one from right here in Winfield, were some of the last to die from the Tylenol murder case. Maybe you don't remember that. There were cases of people taking Tylenol laced with cyanide, a deadly poison, and within a few hours they were dead. Police, after a week or so, figured out it was only in Chicago. In fact, it was only in the western and northwestern suburbs of Chicago, but it dominated news headlines. At that point, Tylenol controlled 35% of the market share of over-the-counter pain medication. It was a huge moneymaker for Johnson & Johnson. And the CEO faced a decision. This wasn't Johnson & Johnson's fault. This wasn't anywhere but the western suburbs and northwestern suburbs of Chicago. How do you respond to this terrible tragedy? What business decision would you make that would be in the best interest of the people and your company? The CEO made the call after only a few days, and he made the call to pull every bottle of Tylenol on every shelf on every store in America. Further than that, he said, anyone who has Tylenol in your medicine shelf at home, whether you bought it a year ago or just now, whether it's opened and only one tablet left, or you've not even opened it yet, you bring that back for a full, complete refund, no strings attached. They pulled Tylenol from all the shelves all over America for weeks on end. It cost, in $1982, Johnson & Johnson, $30 million to do this. Business experts and marketers said, you know what? Tylenol will never recover from the tragedy that these people died from taking their products. The reality is that before the year was out, Tylenol invented something called a caplet, which is why your tablets today don't have little gel-filled pills, but they're solid with a little spray wax coating. And they also invented the seal that goes on the top of the medicine cabinet, or the medicines we buy that I can't ever open. I have to ask the kids to help me with the child-proof caps. They not only recovered, but before that year, the entire year was up, they had gained more market share. When asked, CEO said, this was not a hard decision. We read the founding documents Robert Wood Johnson wrote down. Our top priority is the health and safety of our customers. So it made the decision easy. Here's a question I have for us today about our lives where we're at. Am I willing to make a difficult short-term decision that leads to long-term good? I'm suggesting that many of us, if not most, live on the edge, and because of short-term decisions we make, which often are easy decisions to make, we find ourselves missing one of the greater goods of life, one of the things God has intended for us. So let me ask a follow-up question, and it's this. How can I walk closer to God, improve my relationships, excel at my job, and enjoy more out of life? Now, some of you are saying, well, I can read the latest time management book. Wrong. Some of you say, I can delegate more. Wrong. How can I walk closer to God, improve my relationships, excel at my job, and enjoy more out of life? Answer may surprise us, but it's a good answer. Rest. In fact, I would say we'll do most by doing less. Exodus chapter 20, the Ten Commandments. And in that, we are introduced to the Bible word for rest. The word is Sabbath. It's a simple word. It means cease. Stop. Quit what you're doing. Exodus 20, given to God's people. They've been freed from Egyptian slavery. They are at the mountain. They're going to be introduced to the God who redeemed them and how they relate to Him. It begins like this. It begins, by the way, as all commandments do, with a reminder of relationship. God spoke all these words. This is God's word to His people. I am your Savior. I am Yahweh. I am the one who redeemed you. I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And the first three commandments likely we do okay with. No other gods, no idolatrous images, and don't take the Lord's name in vain. Don't use it lightly. Don't shame His name. Maybe like me, when it comes to the fourth commandment, you're a Sabbath breaker. Let's read, because we're going to read here and also in Deuteronomy, where the command is given to the next generation 40 years later. In here we're given what Sabbath is and why should we have Sabbath, and we're going to talk a little bit later this morning about how is it that I can have Sabbath. And so from Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In fact, the concept would be, because you remembered a Sabbath, you will keep it holy. The 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. And for those of you who are reading ahead and thinking, well, I can hire somebody to do the work, or I can have my kids do the work. No. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, so your employees don't work that time either, or your livestock, so give the machinery some time off too. Or the sojourner, so the person from another country that does the work around your house that you wouldn't do, you pay them to do that work, they also are entitled to the time off. And verse 11, reason. Why? Rooted in our very creation. In 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh. Therefore the Lord blessed the rest day and the stop day, or the Sabbath day, and He made it holy. You, like me, probably are thinking, but I want to produce. I've got to do. I love the reasoning for the Sabbath, because He says, 6 days the Lord made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that's in it. Okay, when it comes to production, you're not going to outproduce God. And God rested. And so, rest, people of God. And look at Exodus 23. Turn over just a couple of pages to a few chapters later. Exodus 23, verse 12, there's a little bit more about this. Again, he's just continuing to roll out, how do I live in a world in a way that pleases and glorifies God? And Exodus 23 and verse 12, for 6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh day you shall, I'm sorry, what's that next word? I know it's a four-letter word to many of us, but you should rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien, love this next turn of phrase, may be refreshed. Does that sound good? Deuteronomy 5, I can tell you're not believing me yet, but we'll get there. Just track with me. Deuteronomy 5. Verse 12, Deuteronomy 5. Deuteronomy written to the children of the people that saw God on the mountain and experienced the deliverance from Egypt. And their experience was different. They had a wilderness experience for their entire growing up lives. And now they're on the cusp of the promised land. They can see across the river the cities that they're going to inherit. And so Moses says, let me just remind you why we're here and what it is you're going to be like over there. And such a way as to glorify God. And so the Ten Commandments are given again in chapter 5, verse 12. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. For 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you, your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, your ox, your donkey, any of the livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. So that's all the same. We get it. It's virtually a word-for-word repeat of what God had said to the previous generation. But the next verse, verse 15, is different. It's adding a rich dimension to why we should take Sabbath. Yes, because God created us. And yes, God rested. So when we rest, we reflect our Creator. But also because of another reason. Look at verse 15. You shall remember that you were a slave in the house of Egypt, or in the land of Egypt. Something about resting asks us to reflect on what God has saved us from. The Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. What is Sabbath? This is where we need to answer the question. What is Sabbath? Sabbath is stop. It's cease. Our kids have always loved the pool. It's probably because when we first came to Illinois, my wife, while I was busy working at building a church, she took our kids in the summer to the pool every single day. And as they grew up, they took jobs at the local pool here in Carroll Stream. And there was a defining moment in our daughter's life when she was very young at the pool. She, as is her character, she loves life. She's fun. She can be loud, and she goes fast at whatever she does. And so she is just having a big time at the pool, and she's running along the pool deck when she hears and a voice from on high in a blue fiberglass seat says, what do they say? What do they say? Stop running! She's like, frozen. The fourth commandment is our God in heaven saying, stop running! Cease from your labor. We are not perpetual motion machines. We were not created for that. We are not redeemed from sin for that. So, what is Sabbath? Simple. Cease. The most common words and the most frequent words associated with this idea of Sabbath or ceasing are the words rest, refresh, stop your labor. Okay, it's not about don't work hard. I am all for working very hard. It's about, on a regular basis, in honor of the God who created and redeemed, stopping that. Just stop. Why is Sabbath? If what is stop the routine. Why? Because God created us. He created us in His image. And God, who certainly was not tired after creation, did not need a rest, thought it was in our best interest to, after 6 days of creating that which we still can't fully figure out, He said, Genesis 1:31, that's good. In fact, that's very good, and says to us, now you, my creature, you also stop and rest and enjoy, consider what you've accomplished in the previous 6 days. And then the second reason is relationship, and that's that Deuteronomy 5. We once were slaves. For us, not Egypt, but for sin in our past, and for some a slave to religion. And God redeemed us. He paid the price in Jesus Christ, who died and rose again, and offers freedom to all who believe that simple message. And He says, in your busyness, in your routine, and in our desire to produce, there needs to be a regular cessation where we think not only of creation, but also redemption, and think, God set me free. So that Eugene Peterson I think accurately says Sabbath ought to involve a resting from what we're doing routine-wise, and it involves pray and play. Relax, enjoy, and give attention to the Lord on that time of Sabbath. So I think we should do this. Let's answer the third question. How can I have Sabbath? How can I cease? How can I stop? How can I rest? And I think that's going to occupy the rest of our time together this morning. And so let's talk about some practical things. How can we enjoy Sabbath? I think recognize two words. One, rest. Two, blessed. God rested and God blessed. And when I recognize that, I think I will find value in Sabbath. In fact, I would say this. My experience in life has been that if I just have a do not, if I just say, oh, that's dangerous if you don't do this, that's not that high of a motivation for me. I do find that I am very highly motivated when I recognize there is great value in this. And I think that I would hold before us as the people of God that Sabbath is not a legalistic thing to say, well, if you do that, you're going to be punished. It's way more saying, if you will cease, we will enjoy a deepness and a richness in our personal relationships, our productivity on the job, and our walk with God that would make it so sweet that we would never want to go back to living the way we have. And so, three thoughts on how it is you and I can employ the concept of rest or Sabbath in our lives. The first one's this. Rest puts God in His place and me in mine. Probably that's the biggest takeaway you'll get out of Sabbath. Okay? God, Creator, Redeemer. He needs to be in that place, and Sabbath forces me to stop, helps me realize I'm really not that important in the grand scheme of things, and it puts me in my place. Listen, relax. We're working on God's plan. God's not working on ours. Anybody else agree with me on that? Amen. It's pretty weak. I'm going to work hard this message to get you where I want to go, and so many people I talk to them, and they don't say this, but I kind of get the concept. It's like, hey, preacher, if God would just get on my plan. It's like, come on, God, can't you see what a great plan this is? God, just bless what I want to do. Sabbath says, God's got a better plan. Let's get on His. Let's take the regular stop from work in order to recognize God's doing something about putting Him in His place and me in my place with that. I was helped this last week, as I almost always am, by reading something Eugene Peterson wrote. Peterson, a pastor and theologian, on this issue of putting God in His place and recognizing that ceasing, stopping, Sabbath has something about helping me understand who God is and who I am. He writes, the great reality we are involved in is God. That's true for my job, my relationship, my home, my family. That's the great reality behind all of those other things. And most people around us don't know that and couldn't care less. One of the ways God has provided for us to stay aware of and responsive to Him as the centering reality of our lives is by Sabbath keeping. At regular intervals, we all need to quit our work and contemplate His. That's a great turn of phrase. God knows we need this, and He has given us a means in Sabbath, a day for praying and playing, simply enjoying what He is. So, how can I have Sabbath? I'm going to choose to remember who God is. I'm going to take the discipline of stopping my regular routine for the sake of being reminded who I am. You may not know the name Henri Nouwen. He is was a man who spent a lot of time in solitude, thinking and then writing about how God works in our lives through solitude. He had left where he was staying, kind of re-entered society for a while, and he wrote about what it was to be assaulted again by all the senses, in particular in our day, an advertising age, the constant demands on us. And he writes this: it's as though 1,000 times a day this was being screamed at me. Use me, take me, buy me, drink me, touch me, kiss me, sleep with me. Sabbath says, stop. Life is not just about that kind of conspicuous consumption. And I learned to say no. As a matter of fact, there are some elements that ought to make up our Sabbath. In other words, if you're saying, Scott, stop, does that mean stay in bed all day? Well, no, it doesn't mean that. In fact, I would say we've got to be very careful not to be legalistic about it. Matthew 12, Mark 2, Luke 13, Jesus is constantly in conflict with those who say, you can't do anything on the Sabbath. That's not what the Scriptures say. It just says don't do your regular job. And so some elements of a Sabbath should include unhurried time. Isn't that just irritating that I won't get on to my next point? When do we do that? On a regular basis. Do you know, I know you do because I do too. You know the frustration when you're leaving late for an appointment? And you seem like you catch every light red? Or the Wheaton, right? The train comes by and then the second train comes by the other way. Really, time has not changed. What happens is when we're under pressure, when we're in a hurry, time becomes compressed. And we're very agitated and anxious about that. That's why I never wear a fish sticker on the back of my car. I would be a very bad advertisement for our church. Sabbath is a once-a-week reminder to say, unhurried. The viper that's coiled around your gut needs to be released at least once a week. Second element of a Sabbath would be quiet. Turn off the earbuds and the phone, the iPad, and the internet, and the radio in the car, and the television at home. And Mother Teresa was interviewed by Dan Rather. Reporters get really, really nervous around religious people. And he said, Mother Teresa, when you pray, what do you say? She says, nothing. I listen. He said, oh, all right, well, when you pray, what does God say? And she said, nothing. Quiet. It's likely we'll learn the richest lessons on God's voice when we're quiet. That should be a regular part of our Sabbath discipline. Unhurried time, quiet, listening. When it's quiet, can I hear God's reconstructive, recreating work in my life? And also, it should involve focus. The biblical concept is never empty your mind. You get that, right? It's never empty. It's always fill your mind and then focus on that. Fix your eyes on Jesus or meditate on His Word, to repeatedly focus your mind, and often by reading aloud His Word. And so there should be that. And let me clarify on how to have Sabbath. I'm not talking about vacation. Right? I get vacation. You spend thousands of dollars to go someplace you normally wouldn't, to be irritated there rather than at home. I get that. And men, about the second or third day before we get back, we're looking at our watch like, I wish I could be at the office already. Now, vacation's great. In fact, in the Bible, there were 3 weeks a year where they had to have vacation. And so I'm all for that. And by the looks of this morning, a lot of you, or a lot of folks watching online, are on vacation right now. So God bless them. Enjoy that. And this is not that. This is every week a time to stop, to rest, going to require the discipline to make those choices. Second, it puts God in His place. It puts me in mine. Second, rest was created by God for my good. Relax. Because cheating exacts a very high price. We just seem like in today's day and age, live in constant motion, constant turmoil. And so I did research this week on signs of stress. Signs that perhaps we're overcommitted. None of these will be a surprise to you. Fatigue, anxiety, distraction. Wait, what did you say? Stress, which is literally the body's physiological response to anxiety and all of those other things, and fear and anger. How much damage gets done in the home because we don't unwind, but we uncork. Insomnia, migraines, stomach trouble. There was an entire page. I just reduced them down to the most common. Did another other little bit of research this week. What are the top selling medications in America? It's interesting. The top selling drug in America as of June 2015, so this is pretty recent, when it comes to the actual number of prescriptions dosed, is a painkiller, hydrocodone. The number one drug by amount of revenue produced for the companies is anti-anxiety. So we're paying billions of dollars a year to ease our pain and rest our anxiety. Now, I get that there are some people that have been really tremendously helped by those things, and I'm not certainly taking a shot at medicine. I'm saying perhaps the underlying cause of that is because we are walking in disobedience on the issue of Sabbath rest. Rounding out the top 10, another anti-anxiety medication, three high blood pressure pills. Cheating exacts a high price, which means that you and I are going to have to be willing to pay the price to put Sabbath back on our calendar every week. Warren Buffett may be the most brilliant businessman of this generation, certainly the most successful investor. At breakfast with him, one reporter asked a simple question. How do you do it? He was surprised by Buffett's answer. He confided in me that the secret to creating his fortune lay in his ability to say no. Quote from Warren Buffett. I sit there all day and look at investments proposals, and I say no, 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 until I see one that is exactly the investment that I'm looking for. And then I say yes. All I have to do is say yes a few times in my life, and I've made my fortune. Every important yes requires 1,000 no's. Yes to Sabbath, yes to rest, yes to walk with God means no to 1,000 other things that are good but not the best. Sabbath was created for my good. Remember what Jesus said? Man wasn't made for the Sabbath was made for man. There's a blessing in that, and so relax. Cheating exacts a high price. Third, final. Rest is God's way of achieving the most good. This is a note for those of us, maybe you like me, are driven by produce. You've got so few years in this life. Do the most. The way to do that, the way to achieve that, the most good, is by regularly ceasing from doing that. Rest. Relax. Life is too short to hurry through. We're called to more than that. I love that concept of relationship. Deuteronomy 5 says, "You are not slaves," as though our relationship with God is not based on how much we can produce for Him. We are His sons and daughters. Let me hold out for you value. Let me do that. I don't want to scold because I, of all people, ask my wife, will tell you, am a Sabbath breaker on a regular basis. So for Scott and for those of you here, can I just hold out a value of Sabbath? This is from Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 30 and chapter 32 hold out promises for God's people. This was not a promise for all. This was a promise for those who have experienced God's blessing in His life. And Isaiah 30 verse 15 says this, "Thus says the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel." Again, going to that issue of relationship. Listen, child of God. Hear the promise of your Father, our Redeemer. "In returning and rest, you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength." It's a good place to say amen, by the way. But we truncate that verse. We don't read the rest of that verse because that blessing turns into a curse. Here's the unfortunate and foolish sin that the people of God in the Old Testament lived under. "In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength. But you were unwilling." And he goes on to pronounce a curse on those who refused to enjoy what God had provided by way of rest. Isaiah 32, verse 15. In the context of life feeling like a wilderness and feeling like stunted growth and dry and hard ground, God promises this: "Until the Spirit is poured out upon us from on high, and the wilderness becomes a fruitful field, and the fruitful field is deemed a forest." God's going to give His Spirit to His people, and it's going to be good. Justice will dwell in the wilderness. Righteousness abide in the fruitful field. It's going to be just. It's going to be right for God's people. Now listen, verse 17. "And the effect, the overflow, the produce of righteousness will be peace." I know God's doing His work in my life because I've produced peace. And the result of righteousness, quietness and trust forever. "My people will abide in peaceful habitation, in secure dwellings, and in quiet resting places." How's that sound? Great! So often we don't experience that. I'm saying to us, the most good we will achieve is going to come when we rest. When we cease, when we Sabbath. Life's too short to hurry. It was a couple of weeks ago, of course, Nate and Shana were married. That was a joy and a privilege. And last week we actually had had a chance to go to their house for that very first meal at their house. It was terrific. Nate has perfectly perfected how to cook on a grill, and so the brats and the burgers and everything was great, and Shana did terrific with all of the preparation and all the stuff that went on. But the night before that, we had gathered with Nate's mom and dad and family friends of theirs, the Robinsons, who served along with the Nupangas for years, and we played a French version of the game bocce ball. In fact, I think we have a picture here. In this case, we used a little golf ball. You can see it lower there. And then these heavy steel balls that you toss. We have a picture of how the form here, how you toss that. Isaiah has sort of the "I'm a little teapot" release. Okay, and I'm intensely like, don't do that, because it was old guys. No offense, Dr. Nupanga. It was the old guys versus the young guys. So go back to that shot with the three balls there. And we beat them. I'm just saying. We beat them by one. And we got a picture of the pretty girls there too, I think, right? So while the girls were taking selfies, the men were competing, and so... Nah, I'm sorry. I couldn't resist that though. So, okay. You know what I didn't do for the entire hour and however long we played this bocce ball game? What's the game called? Yeah, that game. It's French and I no can do. The whole time we played, I didn't worry about what I was producing. I didn't worry about the time. I never checked my phone once. I lived in the moment, especially beating those young bucks. William Ury, Power of a Positive Note, terrific book. He writes this: every day, each of us is faced with choices, small and large, where saying yes to one choice means having to say no to others. Only by saying no to competing demands for your time and energy can you create space for the yeses in your life. Those are the people, the activities that really matter the most to you. Here is the paradoxical secret. You cannot truly say yes until you can truly say no. I want to close our service, so musicians, you can go ahead and come back up here. Typically at the end of a service, we have you come up and I want to pray with you, or you pray with some of us, and we like that, but we can do that a little differently today, okay? Is that okay? Can we change stuff up a little bit? Okay, all in favor, right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the 4 Baptists in the room here. Let's rest. Let's give it 1 minute. Musicians, you can start playing whenever you're plugged and ready, but 1 minute to stop. Think about God, your place, His. Rest. And you're going to need to get your calendar out at some point today or this week, and you're going to start having to take a red pen to it. Do that. In obedience to God for His glory, our good. Sabbath. Let's do that now. Just bow your heads, close your eyes. Enjoy